Would Josephine Laba please come forward with her daughter Janet McCarthy? On June 20, 1914, the very year the Western world decided to begin World War I, Josephine Laba was born in Halifax. Edward and Margaret, her very strict Lebanese parents, had 10 other children. As the fifth in line, it's a wonder that young Josie was permitted to participate in sport, let alone emerge as the superstar she became. Her sister Effie, who's here tonight, wanted to follow in her sister's footstep, but was not allowed because Papa reasoned, as only a papa can, that one Laba involved in sport was enough for the family. Once young Josie had to fill out a form which asked her for her middle name. Her father, ever cautious about bucking authority, figured that if the form wanted a middle name, the form better have a middle name. He told her to write down Wadia. She said, that's your name. He said, write it down. She said, I can't spell it. So he spelled it to her in English, she wrote it down, and that's how she got her middle name. We're going to hear a lot with these people tonight that's going to teach you a great deal about what times were like in Nova Scotia in previous decades. And of course, this is one of those stories that does that. Despite hard times, or perhaps because of them, Josie was sweet, Josie was nice, but Josie also was highly competitive. Because the best players always chose teams when they played basketball, she was always one of the captains. She never chose her very good friend Agnes Ward because Agnes was small and not very good. Josie would have gone to the end of the earth for Agnes, but she'd not choose her on her team if it meant she'd have a lesser chance to win. Perhaps Agnes benefited from the exclusion, since the records show that Josie once broke her sister Seamus' nose in one of those choose-up basketball games. Times, as we've said, are different. Write-ups describe the fans and fanettes that attended the track meets. Hard to believe. Gia Hearn described sports 60 years ago, said that young girls took part in track and field more than did young boys. 20 was not uncommon in some events. In 1929, Josie once competed against 300 in a walking contest. Despite the modern attitude which existed among some Nova Scotians, when the St. Pat's Sister of Charity found out that Josie was out competing in short pants, they wouldn't let her take the stage at graduation. Despite not being allowed on stage, she won the city prize for the best academic average of all the shorthand students in Halifax. Actually, Josie had been competing in short pants since she was 13, the time she'd taken part in a city playground-sponsored track meet, and then had been discovered by Dal phys ed teacher and coach and summer playground superintendent Edgar Sterling, who's equally famous for having coached Gertrude Finney and Eileen Marr, two women who have preceded her into this Hall of Fame. When she entered the big Labor Day meet in 1929, she cleaned up in the junior competition. She won the high jump at 4 feet 4, then won the long jump at 15.6, won the 60-yard dash, then ran an 11 4/5 second 100 to come a close second to the Canadian champion Gertrude Finney. Though she was to make her biggest mark in track, young Josie Laba excelled in many other sports as well. She was an accomplished badminton player. She curled. She golfed. She also bowled. She was a captain of the St. Pat's High School basketball team, starred as well for the Halifax Ladies Club, which won 4 consecutive maritime championships. In the final against King's College, her ladies club team won 34-10. Just 20 of those 34 points were scored by Josie Laba. In softball, she played third base and she caught. One write-up put her abilities in that sport in perspective when it said the following, and I quote, "Josephine Laba made her usual home run versus South Wellington for the HLAC. It turned out to be the only home run in the game, which could have been excited, or must have been exciting because it finished at 12-11. Kellogg's, the cereal company, was a sponsor for a professional women's softball team in London, Ontario. When they tried to recruit Josie to come and play for them in London, it was Mama's turn to put down her foot. She said no, and again I quote, "A single girl stays home till she's married, then she can do whatever she wants." In 1931, Laba put part of her softball skills to work when she entered a national track meet in Alberta. Among other events, Sterling entered her in a baseball throw. She must have liked this new event, since she managed to throw it far enough for a new Canadian record. Romance of a permanent nature came early to Josephine Laba. It might have come a little later in life had it not been for the persistence of one John Leo Abbas from Sydney, who cut her picture out of a Halifax paper and then went to a track meet at Sydney's old home week to meet her. As we've already seen, things were very different. Josie refused to meet this insistent stranger because as a devout Catholic girl, it would have been entirely improper. She did get a look at him and she sort of liked what she saw. Arrangements were eventually made and the ardent young John, and here's a guy who's never even met her, made his way down to Halifax to meet her in her home in front of her parents. This started a whirlwind romance which resulted in marriage on June 30, 1936. Josie, then a not atypical bride at 22 years old. She only entered one serious athletic contest after marrying, and that was to win a coveted prize at the Victoria Park events in Sydney. She entered the discus because she felt she could win that despite the fact that she had completely stopped training. She threw the discus 100 feet that day for a new Canadian record. When John Abbas was stricken with Parkinson's disease at 43, Josie took over their Sydney hairdressing business and the care of her now invalid husband. This she did despite undergoing 3 operations on her own back, which caused severe pain throughout her adult life. She and John had 3 children. They produced 7 grown grandchildren, produced 2 great-great-grandchildren. He was a kind, gentle man, but very stubborn. He passed away at 77 just 2 years ago. Perhaps her decision to retire was helped by a knee injury she received in 1935 playing basketball. Her knee never got better through the spring and made training for the 1936 Olympic trials out of the question. As an old 22-year-old, all she had to look back on by way of success in athletics was the aforementioned curling, badminton, bowling, golf, and softball excellence. In track, she could look back, having taken the Lieutenant Governor's aggregate medal for winning the most points, including 5 first-place finishes in the 1930 Maritime Championships. She could look back at having twice been invited to represent Maritimes in the Canadian Championships in Alberta, in fact in 1931 being the only Maritimer invited to those games. She could look back at having won the Canadian Intermediate 60-yard dash in 7 3/5 seconds, which was not only a new junior record, but actually tied the best senior time ever run in Canada. She could look back at having joined Eileen Marr at the 1932 Olympic trials, where although she was still only 18 years old, she held her own with the best women athletes in the world. The Canadian women's track team having scored more points than the women from any other country in the Amsterdam Olympics of 1928. In fact, had it not been for an unfortunate false start, she probably would have, which probably brought on by a lack of experience, Josie Laba would have been on the Canadian Olympic team in 1932. Eileen Marr and Josie Laba were sent to the Hamilton Olympic trials in 1932. It was reported in the Halifax paper that Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, they always sent along chaperones, saw to it that Laba and Marr took brisk walks during the train stops in Truro, Moncton, and Campbellton, and also did their normal leg exercises before retiring each night. They were met by crowds of sporting followers at each stop along the way. The lack of training took its toll on Marr as well, in that she suffered a Charlie horse, but her disappointment came after she made the team and before she was to run in L.A. Why had young Josie Laba been invited above so many others at that time? Well, for starters, she held a Canadian record in the discus at that time, 93 feet 7 inches. She broke her own with a 94-foot throw that year, and as you've already heard, eventually threw it 100 feet. She was a 1929 Canadian Junior walking champion. Forgot to mention that one. She held a Canadian champion, a 60-yard dash. Her time of 7:06 for a while was identical to the best time run by veterans Eileen Marr and the very famous Hilda Strike from Montreal. She later went on to run the 60 in 7 seconds flat, which then tied her with Olympic gold medalist, the equally world-famous Myrtle Cook. At the time of the trials, she was the lone holder of the Canadian 100-yard dash in a time of 11.45 seconds, which she had set as a junior. When the CAAU recognized this record, she became the first Nova Scotian junior in history to ever achieve that feat. Ladies and gentlemen, this was one accomplished youngster. What were her rewards like? Well, she once won a pair of running shoes put up by Finney's Sport and Music Store. But mostly she began to collect lots of cups and medals. These were all stolen one time. And then the thief made the mistake of wearing an amethyst necklace Jody had won to a movie. Josie's husband John spotted the pin, had the wearer arrested, and the prizes were all recovered. Josie Laba, Abbas, still follows golf, baseball, tennis, track, curling, and the Olympics on television. I'm sad to tell you that she's also a Blue Jays fan. Perhaps the best way to draw this to a conclusion is to quote a couple letters at the editor which appeared in the Halifax newspaper in the early 1930s. First said, "Dear Sir, will you kindly name the most popular all-round maritime girl athlete and her achievements?" It was signed Inquisitive. The answer came back. It said, "Well, Inquisitive, you've given me some food for thought, but offhand I'd have to say it was Josephine Laba. As the Maritime's most popular all-around athlete. Miss Laba is a good softball, basketball, and badminton player, has an average of 80 for bowling, holds the Maritime Canadian record for discus, is holder of the junior 100-yard title, joint holder of the Canadian 60-meter record, and is known all over Canada for her sportsmanship while attending Canadian meets. Thank you. Please write again." Ladies and gentlemen, a woman known across Canada for all-round athletic accomplishments, but most especially for her blazing speed in the final yards of each big race. This is Josephine Laba Abbas.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's interesting to note in introducing tonight's presenter to Josie Laba Abbas that of the original inductees into the original Nova Scotia Sports Hall of Fame, only 4 are still living, including Johnny Miles, Lee Miller, Gertrude Finney Beattie, and the man who is about to make the presentation to Josephine, and himself a great, great middle distance, short distance runner in that period, Mr. Frank Nix. That had to give you particular pleasure.
Yes, it does, because it's a long time since I've seen Josie. Quite a few years. She was quite a runner.
Indeed she was. So was Frank Nix. Janet McCarthy is with her mom tonight. Let's hear it for Frank. Janet McCarthy is on stage with her mom tonight, and listen, we're well aware and now quite familiar with your mother's brilliant track record. I'm just curious about what your best time was for the 100-yard.
Oh. Oh dear.
Okay, I'll take that back. At what age did you realize that your mom was a very special athlete?
I think I was very young. I think I remember, we just remember seeing cups and medals and particularly a lot of silver cups and certificates of high achievement and in the house. And it was just sort of like a fact of life growing up that we knew that Mom was a Canadian athlete.
Was she the kind of mom who inspired her kids to go out and take part in things?
Well,
Athletics?
well, I think perhaps one of the big disappointments might have been that she raised 3 very unathletic children. I think in that regard she probably has more in common with her grandchildren, who can sit and discuss baseball and all the sports and everything that's going on, all the stats with her, and whereas, well, I'd skipped a generation.
And she's still very much a sports fan.
Very much a sports fan.
Of all the sports that, and you heard Sandy detail her brilliance in so many areas of accomplishment, was there a particular, besides track, what ranked next?
Probably discus and basketball. And later on, curling. When I was growing up, I remember my father and mother were both very active in the Sydney Curling Club, and they were both avid curlers.
Okay. 3 very unathletic children are very proud of a very athletic mom here tonight.
That's right. We're very, very proud.
Josephine, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
In the 1920s and the 1930s, it wasn't encouraged, young women weren't encouraged to take part in sports.
That's right.
You flew against them all.
I did.
But you did it your way.
Help me there.
I guess so.
Okay. Josephine Laba, ladies and gentlemen, an icon. And our congratulations. Thank you, Janet.